up, show the movement. Parade! Parade! Show! By the right! Kick, march, duft, right, death! About! Turn! I am the oldest man in Britain.
Right, here we are then, boys. Put him in. What are we going to say? 60 kilos, 60 kilos. Put him in his tummy. 45, 77.
What infinite heart's ease must kings neglect that private men enjoy? And what have kings that privates have not too, save ceremony, save general ceremony? And what art thou, thou idle ceremony? What kind of God art thou that sufferest more of mortal griefs than do thy worshippers? What are thy rents? What are thy comings in? Oh, ceremony, show me but thy worth.
We've recently increased the dole. What is needed is to find work. There are plenty of jobs for all, jobs which the nation needs done.
Working man I am, and I've been down underground.
Did Arthur call his table round with such a sergeant major sound? Thus newborn Taliesin cry, or aged Merlin sound so spry? Did Richard Burton really live? What Welsh voice will the future give? O Lord, give to thy servant a voice, o arglwydd rho lais iddo was, o arglwydd rho lais iddo was.
O arglwydd, rho lais I dy was.
O arglwydd rho lais iddo was. Learning a new language is like being born again. Pechadoriaid igad pob din pob dinas.
Pechaduriaid I gyd, pob dyn, pob dynes.
Pechadoriaid I gyd pob din pob dinas.
Pechaduriaid.
Pechadoriaid. Sinners all, every man, every woman. Emlyn Williams describing his mother's first sight of his father intervening at a prayer meeting. A trim moustache over lips perhaps too curved for the rarefied discourse emanating between them, a resonant voice, a splendid command of biblical Welsh, histrionic but sincere, and a touch of the hwyl.
Hwyl.
Hwyl. The vocal trapeze on which Welsh preachers swung to dizzy heights, just enough to show he could do it. Amen. Reminds me of something I read in my childhood in Dublin a long time ago.
P.G. Wodehouse, the great English novelist and short story writer, was a young reporter in his early 20s in 1905 when he was sent to cover the Welsh evangelical revivalist Evan Roberts. Roberts was only 3 years older than Wodehouse. It did not take me long to understand why this man had gone through the countryside like a flame. He had magnetism, intense earnestness, and the voice of a prophet crying in the wilderness. His fiery eyes seemed to single out each individual in the hall, and every time he paused, sighings and wailings went up like the smoke of a furnace. And then, after speaking for what I discovered with amazement on consulting my watch was considerably over an hour, he stopped. And I blinked like an aroused somnambulist, shook myself to make sure I was still there, and came away.
Evan Roberts, slightly fictionalized in P.G. Wodehouse's Euclid.
Roberts drove himself into nervous breakdown and seclusion, and other preaching voices went almost as far in epidemic success and personal destruction. But more secular figures used the preacher's wizardry. One could hardly get more secular than Dylan Thomas.
It was a cold, white day in High Street, and nothing to stop the wind slicing up from the docks. For where the squat and tall shops had shielded the town from the sea, lay there blitzed flat graves, marbled with snow and headstoned with fences.
Now, Dylan Thomas, for many people, symbolises a Welsh voice, and it's interesting to ask why this should be so. Not many people speak Welsh, or for that matter, Anglo-Welsh, like Dylan did. And yet for many people, he is the apotheosis of a Welsh voice. And the reason, I think, is that he has managed to lock into this dominant tradition of the Welsh preaching style. The preaching voice which goes back 200 or 300 years and which produced the distinctive trilling tones of a hwyl as the preacher launched into his emotional expression. That the tones like this which would come across and thrill an audience, and which didn't restrict themselves to the church situation, but which were picked up and used by other people when they were recapitulating the sermons at home, because not everyone was at the sermons on those occasions. And this has become part very much of an orthodoxy, an unconscious orthodoxy, which has affected many people who write poetry, who work with poetry, who produce any kind of public voice.
The linguist David Crystal. Saunders Lewis, playwright and Plaid Cymru leader, would use the modern magic of broadcasting to denounce the hedonism and anglifying he saw as corrupting modern life.
Mi rhaid dybiad hefyd y bydd terfyn ar y Gymraeg yn iaith fyw, ond parhau'r tueddiad presennol tua dechrau'r 11 ganrif ar 20, a rhoi bod dynion ar gael yn Ynys Prydain y pryd hynny. Nid dim llai na chwyldroad. Yw adfer o'r iaith Gymraeg.
A radio could also bring more comfortable voices, such as Winford Vaughan Thomas.
And all around, the rolling hills of the Mignant and the long ridge of a Rennig Fawr in the background with Moel Llyfnant. I've just climbed over it. And we've got puffy clouds and a blue sky. A wind that almost seems warm after yesterday's gale.
Voices of Wales, magnificent in their individuality, but to me also expressions of a totality. The Welsh voice. It may be very private as well as public. It may be divided from south to north, from the Wye Valley to Cardigan Bay, from here in the Rhondda to Gwynedd. But if it's many, to me, it's also one. Musicality seems central to it. So does a sound which I would call warning.
What will you give me, say the sad bells of Glendy? Is there hope for the future, say the brown bells of Merthyr? Who made the mine owners, say the black bells of Rhondda? And who robbed the miner, say the grim bells of Blaenau?
A voice from the skies, a voice from the pits, Idris Davis. In the 15th poem of his epic Gwalia Deserter, Davis, who lost his job through the general strike as a miner when he was 21. Gwalia Deserter, he intended to be the voice of a generation, the generation of the Depression of the 1930s, and very consciously differing from the cheerful commercial ditty Oranges and Lemons, which gave the sound of the London bells. The bells and the mines symbolize the same thing about the Welsh voice. Its rhetoric, its depth, its resonance, in which sound itself carries its own magic, quite apart from the actual statement. It's hard for us in our comfortable world of today to feel the full impact of the radical anger of the Welsh voice, as in 1909, when David Lloyd George, Chancellor of the Exchequer, used it to rouse the fury of the House of Lords into rejecting his budget and thus precipitate the Parliamentary Act which would break the House of Lords' veto.
I went down a coal mine the other day. You could see the pit props bent and twisted and sundered until you saw their fibers split in resisting the pressure. Sometimes they give way, and then there's mutilation and death. Often a spark ignites, the whole pit is deluged in fire, and the breath of life is scorched out of hundreds of breasts by the consuming flame. And yet, when the Prime Minister and I knock at the door of these great landlords and say to them, "Here, you know that these poor fellows who've been digging up royalties at the risk of their lives, some of them are old, they've survived the perils of their trade, they are broken, they can earn no more. Won't you give them something towards keeping them out of the workhouse?" They scowl at us, and we say, "Only a halfpenny, just a copper." They say, "You thieves," and they turn their dogs onto us, and you can hear their bark every morning.
Lloyd George, his real heir in Welsh radical leadership, was an Iron Bevan.
So if Anthony Eden is sincere in what he is saying, and he may be, then if he is sincere in what he is saying, then he is too stupid to be a Prime Minister.
Bevan's very different Welsh voice, bringing almost a childlike glee to exposure of the follies of Tory Premier Anthony Eden over Suez.
He had arranged to meet her at the cross, but now he thought it was a bit too obvious.
After all, things had not gone quite so far as that.
I have no proof I ever had Welsh ancestors, but maybe my fascination with the Welsh voice proves it, because to be Welsh is to be interested in the Welsh voice. Academic and amateur scholars are bringing new scientific techniques to bear on it, and the linguist, Carl James, of University College Bangor, opens it up for us.
I think it's convenient to break up the study of language into 4 major sections or domains. We'll look at one quarter, that would be the sound system, the phonology. And we know that there is phonological accent. Then there is the grammatical system, the system of word patterns, word orders, endings and inflections. That's the grammatical section. There is the lexical stock of a language, the vocabulary which is used there. And then there is the 4th one, that is the conventions of style and rhetoric. And I think that we can conveniently, profitably talk about there being a Welsh voice, an accent, on these other 3 areas. There is, for example, I'm sure there's particular vocabulary which is favoured by English-speaking Welsh people. There is a particular grammatical patterning which is favoured by Welsh people when speaking English. But I think when we think of Hwyl and we think of the language of the pulpit in Wales, when we think of the great Welsh politicians speaking in English, we think, I think, then in terms of the rhetoric of Welsh, the way in which argument is organised, the way in which language is used for the purposes of persuasion, where perhaps the appeal is not so much to logic, but it's an appeal to beauty. It's an appeal to the resources of the language via the resource of the language.
Paham mai dicter o myfanwi, yn llenwyth lygau dion di, a thriddiau tirion o myfanwi hebryd o wrth fy nweled I. Pa les mae'r wen oedd ar dywefus, fi'n cynnau cariad ffyddlon ffôl.
Wylit Llewelyn, wylit laeth pe gwelit hyn, yn calan gan ystranwr.
Laboratory work measures the larynx, analyzes the fluctuations and resonance, makes rhetoric a science no less than an art. And David Crystal, thinks about the musicality that the Welsh voice adds to the rhetoric.
I think there are two ways in which a Welsh voice can be identified, or any voice for that matter, but a Welsh voice in particular. You can distinguish between the accent as such, the actual vowels and the consonants that are used and the way they form syllables and the stress that goes on the syllables and all that sort of thing. And then on the other hand, you've got the overall tone of voice, you might call it, the intonation, the melody, the rhythm of the voice. Now these two aspects are quite different and they turn up in Welsh in very distinctive ways. Now one of the ways in which you'll notice a Welsh speaker traditionally is the way in which they make use of the melodic, the intonational line, the tone of voice side of things.
Gŵr aeth gatrais gan wawr, yn ei fyddin ysgorfa sgwydawr. Crai cyrchunt cynullunt rai awr, yn gynan maltaran twrf ei sawr. Gŵr gorfynt, gŵr edfynt, gŵr llawr, efr hwygau a cheffrawr, oedd eich llef lladdau a llafnawr yng nghystydd hairn dyr ar benawr. Y mordau, y styngau adleddawr, rhag erthgu, erthychu fod ddinawr.
So our journey down the Welsh larynx becomes a journey across space and time. Back to AD 600 in the then Welsh-speaking Edinburgh, where, or in whose environs, the bard Aneurin lived and produced his poem Y Gododdin, an account of a doomed expedition of warriors. And from the cadences of that poem, the oldest surviving Welsh poem, you can see the Welsh, the cadences, the character of the Welsh voice in the centuries that would lie ahead. It accounts for Wales itself being a country of foreigners, of magic, of menace even to the English. And it certainly accounted for the character of English as spoken in Wales. The National Language Centre at Nant Gwrthauyn in the Llŷn Peninsula.
Mae cwrs I mewn ar sawl lefel, dechreuwyr a chanolig yma.
Adrian Price teaches pupils from all over Wales. And a good way to start is to discuss where you are from, especially if you want to discover who you are.
Mae wyt ti yn enghraifft Neil yn dod o Ynys Môn, ie?
O'r Amlwch yn
Dyna fe. I bwy wyt ti'n gweithio?
I Cyngor Bydeistref Ynys Môn.
People come here, by their own choice, to learn a language without obvious material advantages to many of them.
Mae pobl yma hefyd yn dod o'r der, enghraifft Lisa, o ble rwy ti'n byw?
Wy'n dod o Llangendairn, pentre bach yn y de.
Ger pa dre mae Llangendairn de?
Wel, mae rhwng Caerfyrddin a Chydweli.
But what has the Welsh voice to do with the Welsh language?
Without the Welsh language, there wouldn't be a Welsh voice at all. There wouldn't be a Welsh nation, and probably everybody in Wales would speak a variation of regional English accent.
Who will believe my verse in time to come, if it were filled with your most high deserts? Though yet heaven knows it, but as a tomb which hides your life and shows not half your
Shakespeare
heart.
first spoke his sonnets in a Warwickshire accent, conscious of the proximity of Welsh. But cosmopolitan actors must face audiences unhappy with Welsh inflection. An aspirant Welsh actress is coached by Andrew Wade.
Just read this list of words that I've jotted down and feel that you can repeat them if you fancy it, or if you don't feel you quite justify them in any way, yeah?
Okay.
Just explore them, yeah?
Who could know your of cow?
Okay. Just with that first one, the sound, well, just say that word again.
Who?
Now, see if you can just isolate the vowel. So you're just saying the vowel on its own.
Who?
Right. Where does that feel like it's being made for you?
Who? Quite in the back, I think.
Right.
Yeah. Who?
Would you say that was a characteristic of Welsh?
Yes, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think more than in the English, because we have a saying in Welsh, yr iaith fain, which means
thin language for the English. So I think you got a thinner. Yeah.
Thin in terms of the sound?
Yes,
or,
thinner, higher maybe.
Higher.
You've got
right.
more in the throats and more.
Yeah. Could it also be slightly to the fact that sometimes we think of the English as being quite far forward in the mouth. The actual making of it is quite far forward.
Yeah.
Let's take ourselves back to the text now. This looks quite alarming, but you mentioned about the idea of the sound feeling further forward in English.
Yeah.
It occurs to me that we could use a little device which is called a bone prop, which is quite an old-fashioned idea, but it might just get a different feeling to the shape of your mouth.
Yeah.
All right, it'll feel very strange. What you do is you just pop this between your teeth, so it keeps your jaw apart, and you're able to really use those lips and the tongue a little bit more consciously, right? And just pop it there, and just give yourself a chance just to feel those words happening on your lips and tongue now, with that little obstruction there, as it feels like, all right? Okay. Give it a whirl.
Who will believe my worth in time to come?
Excellent.
Like the Queen's English.
Ah.
No, not quite. It feels different.
You feel different?
Yeah, it felt, it's not me talking.
Welsh fought for its survival longer and more successfully than any other non-English speaking language spoken in these islands, including Latin, however much Welsh itself may ultimately have been eroded in South and West Wales. But the extent and the resourcefulness of that struggle for the survival of Welsh meant that its zeal and its passage have been marked into a frontier intonation. It is all very well to speak of a separate identity for South Wales, but one cannot get away from that music. The English language in Wales knows that Welsh has been its neighbour, so the voice itself explains why Wales seems synonymous with music.
Singing is a part of Welsh culture, a big part of Welsh culture, and certainly it has come to be over the years that there's a sound, especially in Welsh male voice choirs, there's a particular sound, a particular tone in that voice, and female choirs, of course. The group Jess invades territory where the English language supposedly calls the tune, if any, and that territory is also the future. Welsh. It's much more guttural language, similar to German. It cuts the phrases and the sentences up and can be used in a much more percussive way. It's more precise with rhythm.
A pop group can conquer the world and lose its own identity by doing it. Jess breaks new frontiers by being more itself while using forms with universal reference. Of course, the Welsh Voice has always liked to celebrate Welsh success abroad, such as when the Tudors captured the English crown in 1485. But was this a Welsh victory? It certainly fastened Welsh looks and Welsh voices on London, but as Horace Thomas in his poem A Welshman at St. James's Park shows, the Welsh voice could not long survive the curse of successful Welsh conquest at England, whether by Lloyd George in Downing Street or Henry Tudor at Bosworth Field.
I am invited to enter these gardens as one of the public, and to conduct myself in accordance with the regulations, to keep off the grass and sample flowers without touching them, to admire birds that have been seduced from wildness by bread they are pelted with. I am not one of the public. I have come a long way to realize it. Under the sun's feathers are the sinews of stone, the curved claws. I think of a Welsh hill that is without fencing, and the men, Bosworth blind, who left the heather and the high pastures of the heart. I fumble in the pocket's emptiness. My ticket was in 2 pieces. I kept half.
The Welsh voice is magic, music, mystery and menace, vibrantly expressing itself in the midst of an ever-conformist world of flattening out cosmopolitanism. But the Welsh voice no longer stands altogether outside that new conformist world. It is making its terms with the market economy. Even in Wales itself, the seduction of the market economy plays its part in eroding culture into kitsch. Even the Welsh voice, seeking to express its nationhood, can wobble into the compromise of kitsch, shadow taking the place of substance, an attractive package covering an eroding reality. Kitsch, said Milan Kundera, is a stopping place between existence and oblivion.
Kitsch sells. Wales markets its identity, selling a mess of pottage as its birthright, selling its birthright for a mess of pottage.
And it has to be admitted that the Welsh voice becomes betrayed by the facility of its own music and word wizardry. Peter Finch confronted this self-betrayal of the Welsh voice 20 years ago in his poem, A Welsh Wordscape.
To live in Wales is to be mumbled at by reincarnations of Dylan Thomas in numerous, diverse disguises, is to be mown down by the same words at least 6 times a week, is to be bored by Welsh visionaries with wild hair and grey suits, is to be told of the incredible agony of an exile that can be at most a day's travel away. And the sheep, the bloody, flea-bitten Welsh sheep, chased over the same hills by 1,000 poetic phrases, all saying the same things. To live in Wales is to love sheep and to be afraid of dragons. Look at the Welsh landscape. Look closely. New voices must rise, for Wales cannot endlessly remain chasing sheep into the twilight.
New voices must rise. Bernard Shaw in 1914 prophesied a great future for Welsh theatre. The young playwright Edward Thomas, in his House of America, mingles the music and realism of the Welsh valleys, where 2 brothers dream of their American cult heroes.
Hey, tell you another thing.
Mum wasn't happy as having us jobs in the first place.
Why not?
Well, you know she is. She's worried about us.
Oh, no. That job would have paid for a trip to America for me, boyo.
Get off, you wouldn't have gone.
How do you know?
Because you're a dreamer, that's why.
No way, mate. I've had it in my head for ages, I have. I'd be there. Find out where the old man lives. I'd be there. There's plenty of work there, see, boyo. Plenty of space. Sun, sand. Imagine driving across it on a Harley Davidson. Chasing the sun. Harley Davidson, right? Money in your pocket. Tiger in your tank. Hendrix on the Walkman. No helmet, just free and moving west.
You can do that in Pembroke, Sid.
Pembroke. Don't give me Pembroke. What do you do when you get to the sea? It's the end of the line.
Oh, you can lie down and look at the sky.
Watching the rain come down. No, what you do, you wait for low tide, you do, and ride alpha leather across the Atlantic.
Can I ask a question, Sid?
Yeah, anything, say.
Have you got a bike?
Don't give me any of that crap now. Yeah?
You haven't got one, have you? I mean, you're skint and you're pushing 30.
I don't know, all right? All I know is that I wasn't born to live in this. It's not natural, man. I could live in the tent, I could, if the sun was shining.
Oh, I wake up in the morning singing Cat Stevens songs. Morning is broken.
I've been born in the wrong country, I have.
I always thought you'd been born a friggin' Eskimo.
If there is such a thing as a Welsh voice, it should speak with the strength that O'Casey and Yeats spoke with in the Irish tradition. It should do. The sad thing is that so far it hasn't. It's done in spasmodic periods. You know, I mean, there have been people who've walked out of shows or reacted very violently to something which is said, but I'm more convinced that it's because of, you know, arbitrary things like swearing rather than an actual voice within the play.
That's what I reckon the old man did, see? Chase his dreams.
Women use that to Sid, not dreams.
He saw his chance and woof, he took it. I can't blame him though, can you?
He had responsibilities, Sid.
Only half the size of his dreams, mate. That's the way I see it. I mean, no one called Tom Jones a bastard, and he went there.
Well, he went there because of the tax. Anyway, he's back now, isn't he, in the Vale?
I thought you liked him, boy, just to be a street. Green, green grass, a home, and all that.
Hey, don't talk soft, will you?
I've heard you playing his records, mate. Him and Elvis.
But Tom Jones one's a man's. The Elvis one's a mine. Elvis is the king, always was, always will be.
And that's exactly my point, Seymour. He was the king. But look at Wales. Where's its kings? Where's its heroes? One answer, mate, we haven't got any. I mean, Ari Seacombe. Ari Seacombe isn't the sort of bloke I'd queue up for an hour and a half in the rain for, is he?
But Ari Seacombe never said he was an hero.
No. He's bloody well right and all. I've had it up to you. From now on, I'm going to do things my way.
Your way?
My way. The Sid Lewis experience.
And we seem still disparate and a little defensive about what we have to say, or whether indeed the culture from which we come is worth expressing in the English language. It's certainly worth expressing and rich in the Welsh language, but the schizophrenia which a country, 3 million people in Wales feel, is that whether there is an Anglo-Welsh or a Welsh identity, which is a happy marriage between the Welsh language in the oral tradition of the Welsh language and the new English language, which I think has got its own rhythm and its own sense of identity, and certainly the people who live in areas of non-Welsh speaking Wales certainly express a sense of anarchy in the language, I think. I mean, it's back to front and inside out and often very poetic, but we very, very rarely see it on the stage. But that's, I think, the way that we should go about finding our identity and believing in the culture and the richness that we have, instead of trying to defend it all the time. We should just do it, go out and if it is good, then it'll be appealing to a lot of people.
Edward Thomas is confident. There's none of that crippling, embittered, defensive ghetto-mindedness of some Welsh purists or a commercialization that fritters away the great Welsh voice into a cutesy, coy, cardboard chic, and it's just as dangerous, whether it's Stone Age intransigence or a shallow futurism. So what will become of the Welsh voice?
It depends, I think, on the future of the Welsh language. It doesn't demand that the Welsh language be revived throughout Wales, and in any case, it is unlikely to get it. But it does depend upon a lasting consciousness of Welsh. If this, perhaps most beautiful of all forms of spoken English, or at least the most magical, is to survive, from this standpoint, no part of Wales needs to feel threatened by another part. They all have the same rich music. The question is whether they can preserve it. So Welsh is not the enemy of anyone's Welsh identity. It is the friend of everyone's.
To begin at the beginning. It is spring, moonless night in the small town, starless and Bible black, the cobbled streets silent and the hunched quarters and rabbits wood limping invisible down to the slow black, crow black fishing boat bobbing sea. The houses are blind as moles, though moles see fine tonight in the snouting velvet dingles, or blind as Captain Cat there in the muffled middle by the pump and the town clock, the shops in mourning, the welfare hall in widow's weeds, and all the people of the lulled and dumbfound town are sleeping now.